Hey everyone, it's good to be with you today. It's March 8th. I wonder if when you looked at the title of today's lesson, your mind did a flashback to a group of women, Thelma Wells and Patsy Claremont and Marilyn Meeberg and Lucy Swindoll and let's see, Sheila Walsh were, I think that's all of them, were called Women of Faith, and they went around and did arena events for women. I think they were like a Friday night thing, all day Saturday. I don't know. I only went to a couple of them. But I thought of them when I wrote down Women of Faith. And so I guess, I don't know, it may be a little, because I am talking about the daughters of Zelophehad. Maybe if you're a guy, you might want to check out. You might be thinking of checking out Women of Faith, checking out. Really, maybe we could just say people of faith, but Women of Faith is because I'm talking about these daughters here. And their dad has passed away, and they're talking about land allotments. Zelophehad has passed away, and because he doesn't have a son, there is no one to leave the land to. So what happens to the family land? Well, then what happens to his daughters? And going up and speaking your mind, standing firm on what you think is right. If you're a woman, again, I'm trying not to be, male female issue here, but we have to talk about the obvious, and that is, in this day, it was not common. In fact, it was forbidden for women to come up and speak their minds. But going back to my thought, in today's society, women speak their mind all the time, loudly and proudly. And I'm not going to get into any of my opinions on any of that. I'm just going to say we now do speak up, and because of courageous women, maybe not necessarily women of faith, women have been given rights, position, and like I said, I'm not trying to go down gender lines and cause up some kind of gender ruckus between us today. I'm not that at all. What I am saying is things are completely different, and they started somewhere. They started with a person who was willing to take a risk, a group of people here that were willing to take a risk. And when you go out through history, there are men as well. There are other groups that have fought for things they felt were right and caused change. So that's really where we are here with these daughters. And the example that they set is the fact that sometimes you have to take a risk in your faith. Now, in our culture, well, where we are, I realize that I'm in America, and not everyone that's listening to Read Through the Word is in America. So I need to clarify that. In my culture, my Western American culture, Southern Western American culture, because I'm in the South, there's not a problem for a woman to speak her mind. But I realize there are other cultures within our Read Through the Word community let me just pause that, hold on, and has been that way my whole entire life. However, there are women and even people groups within our culture, within our group, I read through the word group, I read through the word family, who are from different cultures, and they aren't allowed to speak up. There is a health risk, a risk of their lives to speak up for their faith. And truly, the daughters of Z did indeed take a huge risk going and approaching Moses. And Moses wisely did not assume to interpret the law. He went to the Lord and he posed this situation to the Lord, and the Lord resolved this for the daughters. Now, I will say this new precedent that was set for families, for fathers who had no sons, leaving their land to their daughters, certainly was the right thing to do, because it kept the land in the family. And you will see, as we continue to navigate through the pages of the Old Testament, land is a big thing, and keeping the land in the tribe that you originated from is a big thing. And so what will happen here, because of this precedence, there will be an issue later. This situation here is mentioned a couple other times in the Old Testament, because when these women get married, what does that do to the land? So the precedent did come with some kickback that will have to be dealt with later on. But let's just talk about the risks that they took. And the fact that in the culture, and let me talk about my fact, because my fact is in my culture where I am, it is not a risk for me to be a Christian. It is not a risk for me to have a Bible. It is not a risk for me to watch Christian broadcast, to speak of my faith out in the marketplace. But in some cases, even within our Read Through the Word community, it is a risk. And these girls are examples of taking a risk and believing the Lord to take care of their needs, because they very well could have been stoned. They could have been ostracized from the ostracized, from the community, and had no one. And on the other hand, they could have just said, okay, never mind, we're women. The law is that it goes to the son, so we'll just walk around and beg. They could have lived their lives as beggars. So what were they to do? They could live their lives as beggars and go behind and glean what has been already reaped and harvested, what has already been harvested, glean behind them, much like Ruth did, until Boaz came into the picture. Or they could stand up for what they believed they deserved, and they did. Huge risk. They risked their present situation for their future situation. They knew that their future was going to be in the promised land, but presently they were in the wilderness. So things could have turned upside down where they were, but they were risking that for where they were going. And do I risk things for my future home? Is a great question for us to ask ourselves. And then their lives, they risk their very lives. I've already mentioned that. Do I stand up for injustices? What I believe to be an injustice. Even if it's a law, would I advocate for laws to be changed because they bring about and really are unjust. They bring about injustice and they're unjust. What am I willing to risk my faith for? Am I willing to risk my faith at all? These women are great examples of risking it all and trusting God, the Lord, to take care of them. It's one thing to sit on the sidelines and goes, okay, God's going to provide for me. But it's a whole nother thing to take that risk and let him provide. Yeah, a lot to think about today. What am I willing to risk in my present home and circumstances for my future home in heaven? We'll see you next time as we get together for Read Through the Word.